When I was young, the water sang of being here before I am, of falling sweet and soft and slow to berry bog and
Hello
high
and welcome
meadow.
back to our continuing series on Colorado water, examining the culture and history of Colorado water. I'm Michael Engler, your host. We hope that you are enjoying this series on a retrospective look, but also a look towards the future on what the shape of Colorado water looks like. Joining me in the studio today is probably one of our premier guests that we've had in this water series, and I'd like to introduce to you Justice Gregory Hobbs of the Colorado Supreme Court. Justice Hobbs, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
We have a lot to talk about in a short amount of time, and I want to give our viewers a little sense of who exactly is sitting here with me as we talk about the culture and history of Colorado water. Justice Hobbs, you were a private attorney for 20-some years in land use and water and transportation law. You've been a former educator and current educator, and most recently, of course, Colorado Supreme Court Justice since 1996, I believe.
That's correct. Governor Romer put me on the bench May 1 of 1996, so I'm almost 17 years into it.
Almost 17 years on the bench. And then, of course, what is a fascination, I think, personally, is that you have become this prolific author of the American Southwest, the American West, and all things involving water of Colorado. And not just historically, but also poetically. And
well, that's true. I've been a poet longer than I've been a lawyer and a judge.
Well, and at some point, I'm hopeful that in this interview we can get a chance to hear a little bit about some of what you've written in terms of relationship to water. Let's get to talking about Colorado water. You certainly have an educational interest, and one of the purposes of this broadcast and this series on culture and history of Colorado water has been to kind of archive where we've been, where we are at, and where we are going. And so let me throw this to you. Historically, not a lengthy explanation, but certainly if we want to look at Colorado water law, give me kind of a short retrospective, if possible, about where we've come from Colorado law. And if you want to begin with our origin as a territory or a state, you can pick either one of those.
I think you nailed it.
Okay.
February of 1861, we're carved out of Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, and Utah territories outside of the Civil War. It was carved to take in the Great Continental Divide from Wyoming, down that bend through the Collegiate Peaks to Silverton, back to Wolf Creek Pass, and then to New Mexico. Gold had been discovered. So the Union wanted to hold the possible gold fields against the Confederates. And in fact, the Confederates came up the Rio Grande to try to invade the gold fields.
To try to capture it.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And our militia, the miners, put down their picks, shovels, sluice boxes, went down to Glorieta Pass outside of Santa Fe and bagged the supply train of the Confederates. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
And they walked back to Texas.
Yeah.
But we got, as a result of that, the headwaters of the four great rivers, the Platte, the Arkansas, the Rio Grande, and the Colorado River. So that is our heritage, past, present, and future, the headwaters of the streams that serve 19 states, including Colorado, and the Republic of Mexico at the Rio Grande and the Colorado River.
Let's talk about historically in terms of the specific water laws that may apply to Colorado. And I want to mention something very specific here. The old kind of notion that Colorado law may have been originating from that riparian doctrine in terms of the water rights as they apply to the river and those who live along the banks. Does that notion still apply in a modern sense? I guess what I'm asking is, can we still kind of take that public use of water, and how do you take that complexity or that simplicity and apply it to the complexity of water laws today? Did I make sense in asking that?
Totally. The question is a great one.
Okay.
But we broke entirely from the riparian doctrine of the East and of England. Those are well-watered places.
Okay.
Beyond the 100th meridian in Nebraska, you know, the precipitation falls off less than 20 inches.
Okay.
Rainfall or snowfall. So we had to have a very different law.
Okay.
And so prior appropriation law simply means, and it was the first act of the Colorado Territorial Land and Water Act.
Yeah, the very first act, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
You can take water out of the stream to your farm, across the land of anybody in between, public or private, build a ditch, take the water to where you need it. So this was a an agrarian in our state and territory was for farms. That was the first use. People
Right.
think that mining was the first water use in Colorado. Well, they were up there in the hills, but the water was coming right back to the stream. The miners had to eat, so they cut these direct flow ditches, just like the Hispano-acequias that were in
Okay.
northern New Mexico, 350 of
Right,
them
okay.
by the mid-1800s. So these farmers coming to Colorado on the heels of the miners cut these ditches in the banks of the Platte and the Arkansas.
To divert that water source. correct?
Terrific, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Put it on the land away from the stream, grow the crops for their own families and to feed the miners. And then, of course, the cities grew out of the farms.
Okay, now let's take that fast forward. In November 2012, the United States and Mexico made probably a significant decision or agreement with water, probably the first major agreement between Mexico and the United States since early 40s,
1944.
1944, in terms of really kind of having a firm or better understanding of our water and how it releases through the Colorado River, which is one of your favorite rivers, right?
Terrific.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
one of the four.
One of the four, one
My
of the
favorite
four.
rivers are four.
Okay.
But the Colorado is, we contribute 70% of the virgin flow at Lee Ferry, the dividing line between the four upper basin states and the three lower basin states in Mexico.
and what
So,
percentage?
70%.
70%,
But we can only
okay.
consume a third because we've got these interstate compacts, right?
Okay.
Between the upper basin states of Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah, and the lower basin states of Arizona, Nevada, and California. And so we've had to split the water at Lee Ferry below the Glen Canyon Dam. And Mexico, under that 1944 treaty, which you so aptly mentioned, gets 1,500,000 acre-feet of water a year.
Regardless of our current conditions, correct?
Correct.
And that's where the rub is, and that's under the new agreement, we don't have to release the 1.5, do we?
We do, but,
do.
but here's the new agreement.
Okay,
We can store Mexican water in reservoirs in the United States.
such as Lake Mead or...
Lake Mead is the primary one.
Primary
the
one,
lower basin
okay.
reservoir. Glen Canyon Dam, Lake Powell being the upper basin reservoir.
And in storage, we effectively can still use that while it's in storage, correct?
Well, what we do is keep it in storage
Yeah.
so that it passes Lee Ferry and goes downstream. So now the Mexican entitlement, the 1,500,000, can be stored in whole or in part when there's excess capacity in Lake Mead. And this is good, and it happened because of that Tijuana earthquake that
Okay,
destroyed the canals and infrastructure that take the water from the Morelos Dam, which is just south of the U.S.-Mexican border.
and provides them with some of their water infrastructure,
While
correct?
they're rebuilding
Okay.
it.
With our assistance, I assume, our engineering and dollars probably are part of that?
The Mexicans are quite savvy, you know.
Yes.
They graduate a lot of engineers. So the water storage is what they don't have.
Okay.
The Morelos Dam is a direct flow diversion dam below the border. So they're water rich in terms of their allocation. Now, I'm not saying it's a big allocation,
Right.
But they get the senior right on the river in effect through this international treaty.
Okay,
And you know, an acre foot of water is like 1 foot deep, 100 yards long football field, serves two families of four a year, just
For
to
an
get you that
entire year.
idea.
Okay,
So the
all right.
Mexicans use their entitlement, as we do in the U.S., for farming and business and drinking water. Now the real concern is environmental restoration of the Colorado River in Mexico, because the Mexicans have been drying up the Colorado River entirely
entirely on their end of it.
on their end
Yeah.
of it.
Okay,
Sure, and now there's this international negotiation going on to see if the river can't be remanaged so that there's a live stream in the Colorado River, in the banks of the Colorado River within Mexico.
okay. Now, let me boil all of this down, because I think this is one of the things that certainly those who are viewing this broadcast at a later date, and again, let me mention to our viewers, this is part of a continuing series on culture and history of Colorado water, and our guest today is Colorado Supreme Court Justice Greg Hobbs, and we're talking about complex water law, but also we're going to be talking about Justice Hobbs, one of his latest books, Living the Four Corners, Colorado, Centennial State at the headwaters, and we're going to get to some of that. But one of the concerns that I know that we have in terms of talking about water and education and water law is it is this clouded, complex issue. Boil this down to the local consumer.
All water in Colorado is owned by the public, number one.
Okay.
Number two, our Constitution of 1876 allows anybody who needs it to take unappropriated water, water that hasn't been put to use by somebody before them,
Right.
from the stream for what we call a beneficial use. That simply means farming, city requirements, business requirements, and now environmental, because we recognize in-stream flow rights, kayak course rights. So this old doctrine has kind of adapted and changed, but the important thing is those who use the water first have a priority in short river times. When there's
Okay.
not enough water, like we're back in a drought,
Right.
all right, the juniors are curtailed to those who utilize the water before them. And now that's a fair system.
Primary use first. You're saying they have the primary right to it, and in a time of drought, those who come after, their use is curtailed.
Correct, but now
Okay.
this is why we have 2,000 reservoirs in Colorado, big and small, because in the good water years, you can store the water and then use it
Right.
in the lean water years, like Joseph and the Pharaoh, you know, storing and
Storing,
times of
yeah.
plenty. They stored grain
Right.
in Egypt.
Okay.
We're storing water to grow the grain, or the cities, or the beer industry.
Well, let's talk about yeah. Well, I was going to say, well, let's talk. We're not going to talk about the beer industry, but let's talk about a controversial issue, and we certainly recognize that there may be some things you cannot speak about, but certainly in the last 20 years, there's been increasing discussion about farm rights or water rights being sold to major Front Range cities and things of that nature. Can you comment on that in terms of what that may look like in the future, or what the responsibilities are in that aspect?
Sure, be glad to. Now you have to remember that you can get a share of the public's water resource by
Okay.
actually using the water. That becomes a property right. Now it's not the same as a piece of land on which your house is,
Right.
but it's a valuable property right, this right of use. And so because of the way we were settled in this state by farms,
Sure.
the senior water rights belong to farmers.
Okay.
But since 1891, when Colorado Springs first tested the proposition of using a senior agricultural right but changing it to municipal use, our predecessors on the Colorado Supreme Court said that's fine, it's a property right. But all the water you can use is what you consumptively used for the agricultural use.
And anything
That's
in-
what you can transfer.
Nothing in excess, or just what you consumptively would use?
Just what you consumptively use,
Okay.
because the return flow, let's take an example. You irrigate a farm, 50% consumption is pretty typical, the crops take up.
Okay.
The rest goes back into the groundwater, the tributary groundwater percolates back to the stream, or
Okay.
goes back to the stream directly through a tailwater ditch. The water rights down river are dependent upon these return flows.
Okay.
The return flows belong back in the public's water resource. They don't belong to the irrigator. That's why in water court they have to come in. They want to change the use or the point of diversion or the type of use. They have to get quantified what the
Okay.
historical burden on the public's water resource was. So there's engineering in there, and there's testimony by experts, and the water court is quantifying the water right.
Specifically the right.
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you something a little more on a simple level. You're a former teacher many years ago, New York City, you taught. How do we take this issue of water, whether it be water conservation or just understanding the value of water, and how do we educate generations to come the importance of it? And what is the message to them?
The young people get it. The young people get it. They love the running water, tubing, kayaking, rafting, the music of the water. People at a young age, unless it's beaten out of them,
Right. Yeah.
are using the right part of their brain, you know, to communicate with each other, and I am very confident in this generation. The visual arts, the performances they do. I was just at an exciting water festival up at Metropolitan State University of Denver, 2 days, water in the arts, poetry, sculpture, musical performance.
And your sense is that a younger generation gets the issue of water.
Definitely.
And
now they get hung up on this idea that it's too complicated to understand. Quite not. Quite not. I think it's our obligation, those of us who are teachers, lawyers, engineers who are in this, to cut out the acronyms, debunk the idea that it's too complicated for anybody to learn, because it is not. You need the water, you use the water in priority, the courts protect that property use right. That's the foundation of it, okay?
Okay.
There it is.
In part of this continuing water series, one of the things that I've had several guests stress to me is that we have got to get away from this notion that we have to cry and scream that we are in a panic mode and that we're going to run out of water, and that doesn't need to be part of the message. So what is your message? If you're here and you're talking to a group of 5th and 6th graders, what is your message to them about the future of Colorado water?
It all starts with conservation in the cities. We need to use this water as wisely as we can. 86% of the deliveries of water today are to agriculture. The rest of the water uses, industry, municipalities, the environment is the rest of it.
Within the state of Colorado, we're still at 86% for agricultural use.
86%.
Okay.
But these farms and ranches are extremely important, because that's our open space. That's our food supply. We don't want to just take water off the farms unless we really need to for future municipal growth. And there are new tools the legislature has enacted in the midst of the early 21st century drought. You can lease your farm water to cities. You can lease it for the environment and hold the permanent rights so that you can keep irrigating. Now, you might have to do crop rotational fallowing to free up some of that water. You can't use the same water, you know, on your land.
You can't farm the way Grandpa farmed, right?
No, you got to be more efficient, and maybe you have to take some land out of production, right?
Okay.
So to keep part of the water, sell part of the water, or lease a part of the water. You can't do double duty. That's what the water courts exist for.
Well, let me dovetail into this then. As someone who grew up in the Arkansas Valley, the lower Arkansas Valley, growing up with farm families, what's your message then to young people who are soon going to inherit the family farm? And I've talked to many of them, and here's their dilemma. They love farming, they love the notion of farming, but what they realize is the real value of what they have on their farm or / ranch are the water rights. And they're tempted to sell those water rights, but they want to maintain that farming. We certainly, you and I would recognize the value of maintaining the agriculture, but how do we impress upon young people that farming is still viable in terms of this complexity of the water?
It's the elders that have to show the way.
Okay.
The elders have to show the way. Now, young people, the hardest thing there is to do is to be a new farmer, a young person, and try to get in with these land and water assets. They're expensive.
Yeah, to purchase is almost
absolutely. So you got to be brought in somehow. You know, if you're lucky to be in a family that has that heritage, that's great. But now, you know, these land and water trusts are getting into the picture here. They're using private funds. There's tax credits. You can preserve some of the water on the land, and you can have people farm. Now, whether or not these young people be able to own the farms in the same way the prior generation did, it may be problematical. But my own family, my son Daniel is a irrigated organic grower off the Bessemer at Avondale.
Bessemer Ditch, okay.
Below Pueblo, he grows the Pueblo chilies and 9 varieties of organic garlic. He grew up in downtown Denver.
Okay.
Always wanted to be on the land.
Okay.
Well, he's had to parlay, you know, the resources of my wife and I, Bobby, helping him, living frugally, working
Right.
all the time. You know, from March until October,
Oh,
you're
yeah, it's, yeah,
working like
full
crazy.
tilt, yeah.
And then in the meantime, in the winter, you got to plan your crops. Now, some of this water is sold, for instance, to the city of Pueblo and the Arkansas Valley, and then leased back to the farmers for a period of 20 years.
Right.
Now, it's not ideal, but that keeps the water on the farm. It banks it for future municipal use, and you have to just decide, maybe you can hang on to a base supply in your own name, and then maybe you can work with the city and with your neighbors if they don't need it in a particular year. So you got to be kind of smart, and you got to be hardworking, you got to be lucky, and you got to be able to live frugally. This is no cornucopia of dollars.
Yeah, this is...
Now, those who want to retire, sell the water rights, which we can do in Colorado, bank it as their 401k by the income stream. They're the ones that are selling water off the land. But this has been going on for decades. As our cities have annexed, the developers bring the water ditch shares of the annexed land to the table as part of the incentive to annex a water supply.
It's refreshing, and we're visiting with Justice Greg Hobbs, Colorado Supreme Court Justice, but we're talking about our culture and history of Colorado water. It's refreshing to hear something that our friend Perry Cabot speaks of, enduring optimism, when he talks about the future of Colorado water. You're very optimistic about what the future holds for future generations, even though we might have a good population explosion here in the state of Colorado, and that we have the ability to provide water for everyone.
I do believe that. We have a short budget. As I said, because of these 9 interstate compacts,
Right.
we can only consume 1/3 of the water that arises in Colorado. So we got to be real smart about it, and conservation by our municipal users has to be part of it. And I do believe that we're going to have to convert landscaping to the wisest use of water we can do, consistent with having a southwestern living style.
Which does not necessarily alter your lifestyle, you know, in terms of a negative effect. Yeah, so I'm on board with that. I want to talk about something I found in this book here. When you said that there are 4 great water principles to live by: preserve, conserve, sustain, and inspire. And I know you've just mentioned even briefly or momentarily ago conservation. Do you want to just briefly talk about preserve, conserve, sustain, and inspire as you see it as it applies to Colorado water in the future?
Well, I think this is our whole heritage as a state.
Okay.
Not only in water, but in preserving the cultures, the identities of our peoples, the Hispanic heritage, the Native American heritage, all of those. We're all immigrants, you know. All of us who have immigrated to this great state. Mm-hmm. It starts with the people and then the landscape. So there is this dualism of preservation, is that we have to preserve enough of Colorado and our resources so that we feel comfortable with the fact that we are stewards of the land and the water and of this great heritage of diversity that we have and the people that made it up.
Well, both of us as historians, I know you and I are both struck by this notion. Conservation is nothing new in Colorado. Those who first populated this land that we know as Colorado were some of the best and earliest conservationists. Am I right? Early Latinos and the Indian population that were here. Well, they had to.
Totally.
Yeah.
That great population at Mesa Verde and on the Great Sagebrush Plains, they built 4 reservoirs right at Mesa Verde that have been discovered. Another one out there on the Great Sagebrush Plain northwest of Cortez. They had cisterns, they had ditches, they were storing drinking water. They were dryland farmers because they couldn't irrigate. There wasn't enough water there. The Hispanos coming up from New Mexico. Our oldest water right is the San Luis Peoples Ditch, 1852.
Right, 1852.
In the San Luis Valley.
Valley.
Sure,
okay.
So this heritage goes way back, you know, with these people. And we can't be arrogant. We have to realize that smart water conservation and use is the whole deal of living in the arid lands. And the arid lands are North America, Central America, and South America. I served in the Peace Corps with my wife in the 60s. The first mistake I made getting off the plane was I said, I'm from America. And they said, so are we.
So are we.
You know? Yeah. You're from Norte America.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
come on, let's get with it.
Yeah.
Who are we?
And the notion of to inspire, is this somehow connected with the fact that we, as Coloradoans, could lead not just the western states, but the rest of the nation in understanding these things?
There's nothing like nesting in the headwaters. The
Okay.
Great Divide, right? It's what unites us and divides us as Coloradans. We have this constant tension about will water stay in our basin or not, but we're one Colorado. We're one headwater state. There's only two streams that come into Colorado, the Green and the Little Snake, and they just temporarily, you know, and then they go back out. So this is our heritage. This is our future. This is our legacy, and to sustain it now, we can't overpump our aquifers. We've done that. We've done that in the Platte and the Arkansas and the Rio Grande. We've overpumped.
Well, we're
the
very
groundwater.
successful at that.
Yes,
Yeah.
the high-capacity irrigation pump and rural electrification. And times of drought, you can understand that. Sink
Absolutely.
a well, pump the water. But these are interconnected systems. Tributary groundwater and surface water are one resource. The stream rides on the bank and the back of the tributary groundwater that's recharging, that's coming back from these agriculture return flows and through the sewage treatment systems of the municipalities. So from headwaters to the state line, we're using and reusing our water 7, 8, 9 times.
So, if putting all of that into context, I still want to ask you this question, though, because I feel like we say yes, then we say no. Does Colorado have a water problem?
Yeah, the water problem starts with us.
Okay.
We don't understand what we have. We don't communicate with each other well enough. We don't focus on the fact that we're already limited. You know, we owe these interstate and international obligations, right?
Right.
So we got a scarce water budget based on nature and on these legal obligations. Now, can we live within that?
Yeah, can we balance that?
Of course we can.
How?
Hard work, ingenuity, planning, talking in community. There are 9 roundtables throughout the state. These were created by the legislature to get citizens together to understand that we may double our population, double it in the next 50 years, and we have the same basic water resource. Well, now, you know, Stephen Long, Major Long, coming out in
Right.
1820, he said this land, he looked at the Front Range, but he wasn't there for the spring snow melt.
Yeah, unfit for human habitation. I believe.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
is what he said.
Yeah.
But then what did the people who build the ditches do? Spread the water out. You know, we went from 26,000 adult white males, the only people who could vote when Colorado Territory was formed.
Right.
By the way, we have a lot of justice issues to work on, don't we?
Yeah. Well,
That's our history, too.
I kind of want to call you on that,
Yeah.
Justice Hobbs, but
Well, but
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah,
so the
there's-
farmers spread the water out,
Excuse me.
and they learned from spring snowmelt, from storing it, that we could grow a population 5.5 million now. Let's think about it. Same basic water supply. Yeah, we can do it. Is it going to be easy? No.
No. I like it. Again, I like this note, your optimism. I want to talk a little bit about your authorship, and there's multiple copies of various things here, and I'll show our viewers here. Into the Grand, Justice Greg Hobbs, Colorado Supreme Court, and I'm going to, of course, here's a copy of, yeah, this is what I've been kind of referring to, and I'm going to have you read some things here momentarily. The Public's Water Resource, articles on water law, history, and culture. And again, all of these are available. People can purchase them online or in various, maybe at your local bookstore. Colorado, Mother of Rivers, and I'm going to probably have you refer to that. And then In Praise of Fair Colorado. You love this state. You're not a native, but you love this state, don't you?
I grew up in an Air Force family.
Okay.
But my wife is 4th generation Colorado.
We might accept you, Judge Hobbs. We might accept you under those
hey,
grounds.
If you live in Colorado 3 months, you're a Coloradan.
Okay,
And the hardest thing to do is leave Colorado.
it is.
You know, I hated that time when we had the bumper stickers that said, "Don't Californicate Colorado,
yeah.
Texans go back home."
Right.
Give me a break. What gave us the right to move here and tell other people that they can't enjoy it? You know, the Texans have bought back most of Crested Butte. They had this claim. They had this claim to part of the West Slope.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. yeah.
And the Congress paid them $10 million in 1850 to give it up. But you know, some of our great Breckenridge was claimed to be part of Texas.
Yeah.
Crested Butte. So
Well, we could certainly spend hours talking about who truly owns the land. I think you're right. I want to capture some of that enthusiasm and the spirit of what you just were referring to in terms of Colorado and your love for this wonderful state. As part of this understanding of culture and history of Colorado water, and in reading so much of your poetry, I came across something that I wanted to ask you about, and I wanted you actually to read for our viewers here. This passage, this poem that you had written, "You know what water means." And what I find interesting before you read this is it really kind of captures, and again, I hope that our viewers will enjoy this, "You Know What Water Means" by Justice Hobbs, because I think it really kind of captures the essence of what you're saying about what truly water means. And so, again, Justice Greg Hobbs, Colorado Supreme Court Justice, from his book, Living the Four Corners, Colorado, Centennial State at the Headwaters, "You Know What Water Means."
well, let me tell you a little bit about the poem.
Okay.
I went to this conference up at CU Boulder, and it was an international water law conference, and there were people from Africa there talking about storing water in an ostrich egg, right?
Okay.
In the desert, so they
Yeah.
would have a cache of water. Now, can you imagine? And of course, the women were the water bearers, and still are in many parts of the world. Their job to get
Miles and miles of walking for a minuscule
Absolutely.
amount, right?
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, there is a water problem. You know, the water is not all the time where we'd like it to be
Right.
in human habitation. And maybe we don't like to be cornered in a city, and we're actually living out in a rural area, or we have no choice, you know?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you know what water means.
You know what water means?
When you have to squeeze the water from a plant to stay alive, you know what water means. If you're the plant or the river or any wild thing, you know what water means. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Minister, do you know what water means? Oh, you high court justices, do you know what water means? Imagine you're a woman storing water in an ostrich egg for when the water disappears. You know what water means. Imagine you're a seed that never knows the joy of having roots. You know what water means. Imagine you're a river or a wild thing or a person. You know what water means.
Very fascinating. Love it. Again, you just heard passage, "You Know What Water Means," taken from Living the Four Corners, Colorado Centennial State at the Headwaters, and we've been visiting here with Colorado Supreme Court Justice Gregory Hobbs. I want to kind of wrap up with something that is, again, as an educator, this is fascinating, because this poetry, not just that particular piece, has taken on a new life in the form of maybe a more modern musical sense. And can you give me the genesis of how one of your passages or poems has now become a rap song and is maybe inspiring a new generation of young people to think about this?
Well, you never know what happens, right? So this is a book, this Colorado Mother of Rivers, 219 water poems written over the course of 4 decades.
Okay, and if you'll hold that up, I want to make sure our viewers can see that. Colorado Mother of Rivers.
So
okay,
this is on the Colorado Foundation for Water Education website.
Okay.
CFWE.org. You can download the entire manuscript.
Okay.
Or you can buy the book. I donate, by the way, all the proceeds from all the 5 books I've written as a justice of the Supreme Court away. I donate them away to the Legal Aid Foundation or the Water Foundation.
Or the Bar Association.
The Bar
Who
Association.
does some wonderful things in our communities.
Correct.
Okay.
They publish
All right.
3 of these books. I don't take any royalties.
Okay.
So
Very
the
nice.
idea is to communicate and educate, get this material out. Well, lo and behold, this rapper, Jorge Figueroa, who works as a water policy analyst at Western Resources Advocates,
Okay.
put the poem Colorado Mother Rivers, the lead poem out of this volume, to a rap. And it
Okay.
was performed at Metropolitan State University of of Denver a couple weeks ago. Fantastic, you know, the words just lie there, but they breathe life when they come through the lungs and the lips and the mind and the heart of a musician, poet, a rapper, a communicator.
So your message has now taken on a whole new level in terms of getting out there and maybe a whole new generation,
Well,
as I mentioned.
You know, it's these young kids who are picking it up, and it's very humbling. You know, I'm 68 now. I've been scribbling for 4 or 5 decades. And somehow these words then they're coming alive through their voices. And it's very gratifying. But the most important thing is their own voice and their own talent, their own ability. Their musical ability is built into the water. Walk down the Arkansas on any stretch of it. You hear the voices of the ancestors bubbling right beneath the surface. There's a hubbub going on, a murmur, a conversation.
All on water.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what water is. We're water creatures. In our mother's wombs, 96% water. You and I today, everyone who's tuning in here, 76% water. So we're water creatures and we resonate with that.
I'm going to make that the final word. I like that. That's a nice way to end our interview here. Justice Hobbs, thank you. We appreciate your time, and we hope that you will continue to be part of this conversation about culture and history of Colorado water. I got a sense that retirement officially from the bench may be down the road, but we probably are going to hear more from you in terms of Colorado water.
Well, I like being in Colorado community.
Thank you so much. We want our viewers to stick around. You're going to hear Jorge Figueroa's, is that his name?
Yes.
His rap interpretation, if you will, of one of your pieces immediately following this broadcast, and we hope that you find that entertaining. Again, want to remind our viewers as well, you can purchase many of these books, or almost all of them, I would say, at your local bookstore, or also online somewhere at some source.
You bet.
And feel free to look up Justice Hobbs. You can find him online and kind of follow his career, not just in terms of this, but also his judicial action on the Colorado Supreme Court. We, again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to having another conversation with you down the road.
Thank you.
Again, you've been watching our continuing series on culture and history of Colorado water. Enduring optimism is our key theme here, looking at water history, but also water of the present and also of the future. We hope that you find this entertaining, but also informative. We hope that you stay tuned for future segments. There will be contact information at the tail end of the broadcast. We hope that you also will seek out additional information. On behalf of all of our guests thus far, and again, Justice Hobbs, we thank all of them for being part of this, and we hope that you'll continue to tune in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
To berry bog and high meadow, and held me in her lap and cooed the willow roots, the gaining pools, and called me through bright dappled grass, and called me, oh my shining one.